Well, anyway, Danny, welcome. Thanks. I've been meaning to do this for a heck of a long time to interview you. It's been, I know you've interviewed me on your podcast. I think twice, even if I'm not mistaken, something like
Twice,
that.
man. We had you on before and after Joe. Before and after Joe. We
Okay.
had you on.
Okay. Yeah, I know it's been a while. That's been a couple of years ago now. So,
Yeah.
first of all, you look great, Danny. When you shave your beard, you drop like 10 years, man.
I know, man. It's crazy because Mauda prefers the beard, but everybody's like, "Oh, you look great," but it's not going to last long because I got to keep the wife happy. She
So you
likes
got to
me
grow a
looking like
beard
a
back. Yeah, I
savage.
got you. Which probably
Yeah.
feels cooler in the summertime anyway.
Yep.
Speaking of which, how is she doing? She doing okay back home and everything?
She's great, man. But let me tell you, I think we have COVID.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, she's waiting to get her results. I'm getting mine tomorrow, but at this point we're self-isolating, unfortunately. But I think I'm over the hump. I started, you know how you don't pay attention to these things because you have these, like, I started to have body aches when we got back from Mexico last week, and then at the end of last week I lost my sense of smell and taste, and that's when I was like, okay, I think I might have COVID. So chalk one up to good health because I don't feel terrible, and I feel like I'm already kind of getting over it.
Yeah, that's what it's about, really. I mean, most people are exposed. We're exposed to, gosh, thousands of viruses on a daily basis, and our immune system fights it up. I just thought, yeah, I think I just saw you doing like walking on your hands the other day, though. Where was that? That was in Texas or something, wasn't it?
Yeah, so Jamie came down and we met up with Logan Delgado because the Keto Coach app is launching a new product. So we were doing some promotional videos, and every time I do any type of workouts, I'm gonna pull out the weird stuff. You know how we like to do the weird stuff that nobody does because it's just cool. So I did a bunch of handstand walking, kettlebell swings, hanging knee raises or hanging leg raises, some rowing. Man, I can't wait for everybody to see it because it looks like a freaking Nike commercial. It's just like, it looks real. I mean, and Jamie, you see Jamie, anything that Jamie touches is gold. So
Yeah, she's had a good year. We're going to have her on coming up in the near future. Well, Danny, just in case people aren't familiar with you, can you just give a little background, if you don't mind?
yeah, so I've always been obsessed with performance, the performance side of things. Strength and conditioning. Similar background to you. I played college football at Columbia University. Got my master's at University of Florida in human performance, and I spent the first 8 months with football. And then a position opened up at the basketball facility where I was designing programs for men's and women's golf and men's and women's tennis, and then assisting with basketball. And then we won the national championship in 2006, and the timing was great because I was graduating, and our assistant head coach got the head coaching job at VCU, took me with him, and I was the head strength coach at VCU basketball for about a year and a half. We broke every record in school history, conference history. We were 28-7 conference champs. We beat Duke in the tournament. And then, when you're doing this, I mean, my parents, my dad didn't graduate from high school. My mom didn't go to college. And so here's their son graduating from an Ivy League school and telling him that he wants to be a coach. And so I did that for about a year and a half. And then I started to chase the money, started in pharma, and then moved to medical device after a few years. And I was in women's health my whole career. So anything in the pelvis, I've been in all those procedures, assisting with all those procedures as far as troubleshooting and stuff. And, 2016 in June, I had 3 months earlier pulled out of a meet because I tore my meniscus, and I dieted for a few months to try to lose some weight and take the pressure off the knee. And at the time I was doing like a bodybuilding type of diet, got really lean, got really miserable. And really it was just a quality of life thing at the beginning, just because I just was sick of binging on the weekends. So my carbs were already low, and all I did was add fat. And after 2 or 3 days, we were living in a 2-story house at the time. And I remember like waking up in the morning, walking down the stairs. It took like an hour for my body to really feel like good. I felt just much older. And within a few days, I felt lighter on my feet. I felt so much better. And, 2 months later, met Brian Williamson. He interviewed me, and then we started the Ketogenic Athlete podcast. And if anybody wants to know, like most of my time doing this has been focused on the performance side. Like where can athletes use this, what time of year, what time of season. But in the last 2 years with Fat Field Family, we've also been just sharing what we do with the kids and sharing every side of it, you know, not just the nutrition and the fitness, the parenting, the education, just because we really do feel that all of these things are not separate. They're all together. And that's basically what I do.
Yeah, I definitely want to touch. You know, and I know you know Robert well as well. We just had Robert on here, Robert
I
Sykes.
saw the YouTube side of it. I
Yeah,
hadn't
yeah.
caught the whole thing, but it
Yeah,
was, you know.
I thought it was a very good one. I mean, he really got into detail and fairly particular about how he dialed in his macros, and I thought that was pretty fascinating stuff. But talk to us a little bit about the performance side, because you know it's most sports scientists will say that to optimize your performance, you must have carbohydrate in the diet. I mean, there's some that are coming around to periodization, and there's sort of thought that maybe train low, perform high, sleep low, there's different theories on that. So what has been your over time, have you found different activities lend themselves better to different styles and macro compositions?
Yeah, I think like the biggest difference, first of all, is the person's training age and level of skill and strength. You know, if you're someone who hasn't trained for a long time, you know, you really don't have to pay attention to these things. You're just gonna put on muscle. You're just gonna do fine. And chances are, if you are that person who comes with, from a hyperinsulinemia or insulin resistance background, you're gonna have to get that down. And so like it doesn't make sense for that person to ever incorporate carbohydrates. Now, me, I feel like I've been susceptible to every freaking trend and BS thing that's come out, and I always end up trying them. And, I'm at a point now where I'm like struggling with the fact that I've tried so many things and they always seem good at the beginning and they always end up going downhill. Like, for example, the carb side of things, I do see that for a good couple of weeks, if I bring carbs back in, and for example, if I'm doing a high volume day where I want to train, supersets, less rest, if I have carbs, I noticeably see the difference. And when I first started training with my buddy Ben, you got to meet Ben Pekulski, right, at KetoCon? Yeah. So when we would train, he would add carbs and I would hit a wall and he wouldn't. And, give you an example between Robert and I, Robert has, when we did our genetics with Anthony J and he read them on air, we had some significant differences. Robert is very slow twitch dominant. He's the type of guy who, at 190 at the top of his bulk decided to run a marathon without any training. I wouldn't be able to do that. I don't think, I'm susceptible to cramps, and I haven't figured that part out. And that's why I find myself always in the summer, adding some carbs just because they're like a quick Band-Aid for that. Like they help me, they just help me hydrate myself a little bit better. But it always happens to where if I do it for more than a month or so, the benefits the risks start to exceed the benefits. And I didn't notice that this time around. And I was like, by the time everything was done, I was like, get me back to carnivore. And, just being a week and a half back into carnivore, it's just like, it's like my first love coming back to her. It feels good. My blood sugar is awesome. My blood sugar is like, I got this CGM on, and that's the thing that I noticed with carnivore was I never saw a swing in blood sugar postprandial. And I even was doing experiments. At first I was like, okay, I'll start with a pound. And then I went to 20 ounces the next day. And it took me all the way up to 32 ounces in one meal for me to see any significant blood sugar increase. I know there's a lot of nuance to that. I saw the video that you did with the CGM and stuff, but between that, the fact that my meniscus started to bother me again when it hadn't bothered me in forever. I started to feel like some tendonitis in my right elbow and my bicep, and all that stuff literally within 3 days went away. So if you're someone who, there's so much variability, and I have to say I believe that, because there are people who can just train the way they used to train and do fine. And when it comes to that with me, I have to be careful. Like when I start to hit it really hard, I just hit a wall. And, I just feel better when I'm doing that high intensity stuff, but I've never given it the full chance like Robert did. Robert stayed with this, and Robert, I don't know if he went into this when he spoke to you, but he does feel like the more time under your belt, staying strict, you just hit other levels of fat adaptation that other people don't. I think I've hit a pretty good level because I've had days where I eat 200 and something carbs and I wake up the next day in ketosis if I'm testing. So my body is geared towards burning fat. But I don't know, man. I feel like I'm questioning everything that I've done in the past year. I'm like I end up going off the reservation and I always end up coming back. It's like, why do I keep leaving? Part of it is also because I love different food. I just love to eat food. I'm not that guy. I wish I could be like Brett. Eat burgers and bacon every single day, 3 times a day. I think the world of you, man, for doing that. But maybe I just like that variety. It has nothing to do at that point from a performance or utilitarian aspect. It's straight pleasure.
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of us like to eat. There's no doubt about it. I think the one thing you mentioned, and I think I responded to, where do you get to your 50s, and then you really see those things catch up if you're not if you kind of straight, you get it's a self-correcting course pretty quick unless you don't mind being in pain, and I think that's a pretty big motivator for most people because we talked about, and I've talked about this for years now. I mean, when it comes to performance, if your meniscus is hurting you, it's going to be hard to want to go and crank out sets of squats. I mean, and so that actually has a net negative effect over the long term, and so. Whereas I think, you can look at fuel strategies in the short term, but in the long term, you have to have something that's going to keep you coming back day in and day, year after year, month after month, whatever. And so it's a different thing. But I mean, it's good to experiment. And I like I said, when I look at you, you're clearly not someone who's struggling with obesity or, overt metabolic disease. And so you have a little bit more room, but like I said, your body will let you know, like your knee will probably start hurting before you ever got fat, so I mean, at least you have those signals when you're, kind of bumping against the boundaries there. Because like you said, you've been in the ketogenic space for a number of years. Were you able to make any improvements in your athletic ability going from a more carbohydrate-based diet to a fatter-based diet, a ketogenic style?
I actually saw a much bigger bump in performance switching from ketogenic to carnivore than I did switching from a carbohydrate-based diet to keto. I remember texting you when I first got that sub 120, 500. I was so freaking pumped, man. That was a big deal for me. And that was all carnivore, I just felt like, especially with the rowing, I feel like carnivore really helped my rowing out more than anything. And so there were a lot of differences. There was also switching to ketogenic dieting. I had so much more energy. Two different ways. Like I had more, just my mental acuity improved. And so I remember just about a month into it in 2016, I was in a hospital about 2 hours away from my house. And I was walking down the parking garage and I'm just like blown away. I'm like, wow, it's 3:00 right about now. I usually need a coffee or something. And I feel so good. I feel light on my feet. From a productivity standpoint, that was the year that I finally won the Pinnacle Award, which was like the highest sales achievement award. And I also found myself like, I got to park further away. I got too much energy to get out. I got to walk more. And so just all around, all of my areas lifted more. I haven't been able to figure out the top end strength side of things because I don't know what it is. There shouldn't be anything affecting top end strength just from removing carbs. But this time around, when I added carbs again, I did feel stronger. And so I don't know if it's what I've been training, the way I've been training, but there was some sort of, I don't know what it is, because every time I try to look for something, there's nothing that would indicate that you would get stronger just from carbohydrates. You know what I mean? So I haven't figured that part out, but I can tell you exactly what you said. You know, it's not about vanity anymore. It's about, you know, I start adding things back in, and all of a sudden I start getting all the things that people just resign themselves to, just because, you know, you're pushing 40 and you think, oh, well, that's just part of life. But that's not around when I'm strict carnivore.
Yeah, let me, because you said you were in pharmacy and medical equipment type stuff. What was the impetus to say I'm done with that and I'm going to switch on to something else? When did that? Tell it to me about that transition.
So in 2016, when I started the ketogenic diet, I had been out of the strength and conditioning space. You know, back in the day, I would always spend at least an hour a day reading something, bettering myself, you know, writing, being published on online things. And then I took a break, and then I started to get back into it. And about a year in, you know, let's see, I started in June of 2016, and right around June, July of 2017, someone said, I wanted to start just eating meat, because Amber had been on the Keto Evangelist podcast, and I was blown away by it. And so Brian Williamson and I, that month, all we did was we ate salmon and beef, you know. And now, like a couple months into it, I was feeling so freaking good. And then at that same time, my company decided to do what big pharma and medical device companies do, and we bought Monsanto, and that bothered me. You know, I just didn't want to align myself with that company. But then the other thing is, we had this big compliance BS thing that went on. None of us had broken any rules. It was just, long story short, there was someone in the company did some things that were out of compliance, and then she got audited, and it highlighted a problem that was being done around the whole company. And to give you the details, you know what it was? It was literally the lunch sheets. When we would do lunches, we were all using, you know, lists of the employees there, and then we were putting a different cover sheet on there, and they were telling us we had to basically switch the things that, you know, every time. And just for that, I had to go through this whole compliance thing, and I remember just feeling so betrayed, because, you know, I was the company guy, and I was like, you know, always saying, you know, when people would complain, I would always tell them, look, we got it made. But when that happened to me, I realized, like, it doesn't matter what you do. You're just another number. And so I had a few choices. I had a choice of either, if I lose my job, starting to interview again. And you know how that goes with when you interview for a medical device job, you got to become an expert in the disease state, the anatomy, the products, and you got to go through 4 or 5 interviews, and then you may still not get picked. And so that was the first time that I decided, you know, what would happen if I just quit my job and did this full time? And so I took over a year to save money, to build my brand up. And I was going to quit in September, October of 2018. And then between my manager getting fired, which I didn't like because he was a top performing manager in the country, had never done anything wrong, compliance wise, he just was managed out by his manager because they didn't get along, I guess. And then when my youngest got hit and run over by a truck, I was like, I'm going to take the rest of my vacation for the year, spend time with him at home while my wife would take my other one to do homeschool things out, you know, out and about. And I ended up quitting, and we just celebrated our 2-year anniversary. So I get to wake up every morning. I've taken a huge, you know, cut in pay, but I wake up every day and I do what I feel like I've been put here to do, which is to talk about all the stuff that we talk about every day. I don't regret it one bit, man.
Yeah, amen. I know exactly how you feel. In a very, very similar situation, kind of made the same kind of decision ultimately. And it is more rewarding what I do now, and then hopefully what I'll continue to do for the foreseeable future. So it is good. So yeah, I remember when your little boy got hit. I mean, that was pretty scary. I mean, is he totally okay now, or what was the circumstance with that?
Man, it was my nanny was taking them to the pool. I had Rachel Gregory here in town. We were about to record a podcast with Maura, with my wife, and I was about 3 minutes away when I got a frantic call from my wife, who had left the door wide open, the garage door open, and she's running to the pool telling me that my son was just run over. And I freaked out. By the time I got there, they had taken him to the hospital. And when I got into that emergency room and I saw him, there was blood all over his head. I didn't know if his skull was cracked open. His eyes were rolling back. His ear was like torn off. And he had, all this was road rash. But every step along the way, man, we were so blessed, nothing with his skull, nothing with his brain, nothing with his internal organs, nothing with his spine. And it was a tough 4 days, but it gave us a lot of perspective. And I know that I want to think that was for a reason, because there were so many people all around the world holding their kids tighter after that, And that was basically the final impetus for me to just be like, you know what, there's more important things than, because my mom was telling me, why don't you just stay in the company and wait till they fire you? I could have gotten a couple, an extra 10, 15 grand easily for but I just knew that I had to just quit and do this the right way and do it now. And it's been so worth it, man. I mean, Dean is good. He's a miracle. He has sensory processing disorder. So I know that we've never talked about that. I'm surprised we've never talked about some of the similarities, but I wouldn't know like what's going on internally. If that had something to do with it, I would love to get him like a SPECT scan to see if there's any type of issues there. But I mean, all things considered, he's doing pretty freaking awesome. I mean, he's bright, he's great. So I think he's good. I think he's in pretty good shape.
Yeah, that's good to hear. Thank goodness. Tell me a little bit about the Fat Fueled Family situation. What's the story on that?
So we started to, I don't know how we came up with the name, but we started to realize that there's so many people out there that are finally like getting a hold of their health and they're starting to feel better. And then there comes a point sooner or later where you're like, wait a second, why am I feeding my kids different than myself? Like, why am I still buying cereal and all the crap? And I remember everybody asking us questions back in the day, like, how do you get your kids to eat well? My kid is so picky. All he wants is Doritos and all this stuff. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, how are people not realizing that they're the ones who buy the food? And so, we're like, listen, we really wanted to show people. That's why we have an account for the kids, Fat Fuel Kids, where we show the things that we feed them. They're much like your kids. They're probably eating a carnivore a lot of the time, or paleo. Like they do just fine with like burgers and meat and steak. Like they have eggs and bacon for breakfast, but sometimes they'll have sweet potatoes. Sometimes they'll have all this other stuff. And let me tell you, my kids tower over every other kid. Like Desmond is 9. He wears size 12 clothing. I wasn't like that. I don't know. He didn't get that from me. And they're just so bright and they're just so even keeled. They're boys, so they're still fighting and doing all that stuff, but they're just not the same as these other kids. All these other kids, you look at them, you could barely get eye contact. And I noticed the differences with my kids. Like if Dean has food coloring or wheat, we start to lose eye contact. He's there, but he's not really there. We see a lot more stimming. And he starts to do things like that, and you take that crap away, and it's literally better than any drug. They haven't been on any drugs or anything. So we just wanted to show all of it together from like a practical standpoint. Like we were thinking, like, okay, why don't we record videos of like just what it looks like from a daily standpoint, like breakfast, lunch, dinner. And we think that that's going to be really helpful to people because they can see a meal plan or they can see all this, but it really looks more real when you just show them this is how it is. And I think it's been very helpful. We still get a lot of the same questions like you do. I don't know how you do it, man. I was on that live last week and it was like, what about organ meat? What about collagen? And it's like the same thing over and over and over. But you realize that there's so many people that just they're coming into it like daily, and they need those questions answered. So um, I've spoken to a lot of people who have said, you know, we've followed your lead, and now they're sharing their family stuff. And so now there's so many other people that are sharing how they do it with their family. And then I think that's how we build that momentum and get things to change, because we know it's never going to come top down. It's always going to come from the bottom. So that's really the goal.
Yeah, I mean, as somebody who worked in that industry, you know, you on the sales side, and me as a consumer, and basically you know, kind of an unwitting independent contractor, so pharmacy, you know, they're not going to turn this around by putting everybody on healthy diets. I mean, there's just too much money vested in that. So I mean, it's not going to happen. So, and to your point about answering the same questions over and over, yeah, I've been doing it for years, you know. But it's like when I was an orthopedic surgeon. I mean, probably 10 times a day, I gave the same lecture about rotator cuff injuries. It was just same problem, same thing. So you get used to it. You know, sometimes, you know, it's kind of like, look, I've made all this material so you can go to, and I often refer people there. And that's why it's important to get that out there. But you are right. I mean, there are more and more people coming to this every day. And, you know, even because, you know, you've been in the low carb space, the ketogenic space, and now carnivore space for a while, but you know, you go to the man on the street, and many of them still have never heard even the keto diet. They don't even know what it is. So this is still, I mean, we still have, you know, we probably got 7 billion people that don't know what a ketogenic diet is, nonetheless, more or less a carnivore diet, you know. And so that is going to continue to grow. And one thing that, as you've seen, you know, we see industry responding. You see all these keto products, you know, keto friendly, keto approved, keto this, keto that on the packaging. I'm starting to see that on carnivore now, which I think is, I mean, that's just indicative of, well, one is
The commercialization.
but it's also an indication that the market is growing, which I think is a good thing, because I mean,
Yep.
just, you know, the fact that they're trying to make carnivore junk food or carnivore whatever, but it just represents that there's a market there, and there's a recognition from, you know, the powers that be, that this market is growing, and is, you know, in my view, is going to continue to grow, just because, I mean, people are getting so damn healthy and getting better and enjoying it. And, you know, people say, well, who would do that? Well, guess what? There's tens of thousands of people that would do it, and are doing it, and, you know, hundreds being added daily. So that's great. So Fat Fueled Family, I assume you still value fat, though. I mean, is that fair to say?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, protein, when I say that I love protein, you know, it doesn't mean that I don't eat high fat. I tend to eat right around my body weight in protein. And for the most part, if I'm tracking, which if I'm in maintenance, I stop tracking. That was a new thing. That was last August when I first stopped tracking. And then if I'm cutting, then that's when I'm doing a little bit more like managing things. And like, I just find, similar to you, it's just easy to pull that fat lever. You know, it's just easy to cut back on the fat. I used to always laugh when people used to say, I remember people say, you know, fat is so filling. And I'm just like, no, it's not. You know, I can have, you know, a coffee with like 60 grams of fat in it, and like I can eat right after. But I can have a ribeye that's even like 8-ounce ribeye that's right around the same amount of calories, and I will be much more full. So I find that the protein is just much better for satiety. I never do well with really low fat. Like I wouldn't ever do, for me, it would just be, I'm too much of a baby to do like a protein sparing modified fast. I'm too much of a baby. I never bodybuilded for that reason, because that type of suffering, I know it's all voluntary, and it's just really hard for me to be like, I remember everything in the past was about performance, you know, like, you know, eating to perform better, to get stronger. And I never liked bodybuilding. It was Robert who actually was the first person who got me to appreciate bodybuilding, because he's like, yeah, you know, it's totally unnecessary, but that's why it's so good for your mindset. Because, you know, bodybuilders, the ones that really appreciate it for what it is, they love the process because of what it turns them into, not physically, but mentally, you know. And so with my friendship with Ben Pekulski, you know, we hooked up. He reached out to me like in 2018, and you know, we instantly hit it off. I really started to learn about the other side of things because I was like you. Everything was about max efficiency, max power, you know, max strength, and Ben was always doing the opposite. You know, complete as inefficient as possible. You know, muscle contractions, and I really appreciate it because looking back just 3 years ago, 2017, and looking at videos of what I used to do and looking at myself now, and I'm like, man, I don't think I can handle that type of volume. And thankfully, I've been able to cut back drastically on volume, and I still maintain my physique because my execution is so much better. And I don't have to train as heavy, you know, and I love that. So I don't really go as heavy on anything anymore. Like if I could deadlift 700, which I can't now, but you know, I'm going not more than 500. Why would I need any more than that anyways? Like my goals are always going to be maintain muscle, stay strong, stay relatively lean. But whereas before I couldn't do both, I feel like with both carnivore and keto, I can get much more cardio type stuff, you know, cardio intensive stuff, whether it's the rowing, whether it's intervals, whether it's long. I mean, I barely trained for that 50,000 meter row that I just did again, and it was freaking awesome. I killed it again, you know? So, so I just feel like now, and I just start to see just from the conversations you and I have had in the last couple of weeks about like how easily people can be misled. And you can, I know that there's people that aren't doing half of what I'm doing to offer the context of like, listen, this is for me, and this is why this is for me. And they still don't listen. So imagine for people who aren't even adding the context. And then there's people who are just like, oh, well, so-and-so's doing that, so I'm going to do it. And then they have a terrible experience, and then it turns them off to all of it. They're like, oh, it didn't work for me because, you know, I ate toes and like, you know, I didn't feel good after that, you know, or it was too disgusting and I can't do it because, you know I got to eat this, this, and this because so-and-so said I got to do it. And then they can't comply. And I just, you know, I put my burgers up the other day and I'm like, you know, yeah, it's you know, grain-fed beef and, you know, the cheese, I wanted the cheddar because usually you can get the cheddar and they didn't put it. They put the plastic crap on there. But I'm like, even that is better than organic quinoa, you know, like, you know, and someone was arguing, how is that better than organic quinoa? And I was like, it might have vegetable oils. No, it doesn't. Like all these places, all they do is throw water on the grill. If you're low on time, like I want to go into the middle of the hood and just tell everybody like, guys, you can go on the Wendy's or McDonald's diet. You're going to probably save money and you're going to throw away way less food and watch how the whole neighborhood gets in you know, in better shape and they don't have to worry about half the things that they're doing, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I intentionally, when I wrote my book, I intentionally put that, you know, you can go to McDonald's, eat burger patties, and generally get healthy. And I know that upsets a lot of people, but that's the truth. The problem, I think, for McDonald's or these other companies is they don't make their money there. They make their money on the Cokes and the fries and the real cheap ingredients. So if we had a massive number of people going in and saying, hey,
Yeah.
just give me burger patties, they would quickly say, wait a minute, we can't make a profit. Or maybe they might raise the price a little bit. But yeah, I mean, the whole concept of a food desert to me, if you got a fast food burger place, you don't live in a food desert in my mind. You have a place where you can get a quality nutritional product. I know there's a lot of people that think that grain finished meat is poison. It really isn't. I mean, it really isn't. I think that sort of language really discourages a lot of people. And like I said from the beginning, I'm not here to cater to CEOs and rich people that, you know, can afford stuff. I mean, there's many people that can't. You know, at the same time, as you know, I think regenerative agriculture from the environmental aspect, I've made that point. I think that's the way to go, and I think we do need to support that as much as possible, and I'm always doing that. But I guess what I was going to ask you was about, let me think what I was going to say. I had it, but then I just lost it. Tell me about, oh, yeah, so you kind of touched on that, but the behavior, the sensory processing disorders. I've got an autistic child. There is some similarities there. I think they definitely have some sensory
And
differences.
the
And I
only reason
noticed,
I don't say spectrum disorder is because you
yeah,
know how it is getting a diagnosis. He could very well be on the spectrum.
yeah.
We haven't got a diagnosis. So
Well, I
they're
mean,
so
it
similar.
doesn't really, it doesn't change really. I mean, there might be, maybe there's some legal changes, but it doesn't change empirically what you do. I mean, you still support love. Hopefully you feed them right. And that makes a big difference. Tell me about your wife, because Mara is also been doing a meat heavy, and I think often carnivore diet. What
Maura's
has
more
been the effect for
carnivore.
her? Yeah.
Yeah, let me
What's
tell
what's the
you,
story with her?
all those times when I go out and I experiment, Maura's making fun of me here at home. She's like, she's just like, you're so complicated. Why do you complicate things so much? And I'm just like terminally curious. I feel like after 4 years of doing this, man, I feel like I need to go back and go to basics and be like you, man. Like I told you, you never changed. And like you said, none of this stuff, nobody knows anything. Like everybody speaks with such authority on grass fed and all these things, and none of it has been borne out, not even in, forget about RCTs, not even in epidemiological studies. There's nothing. So Maura, when I switched to a ketogenic diet, we were following paleo and Weston A. Price back in 2011. I bought into the hype in 2013 when I left CrossFit and switched to powerlifting, and thinking that I needed all the carbs, and I ate all the carbs, and I definitely put on weight. But she did it with me and she hated it. But that's just how she is. Like we do everything together. And so in 2016, we started the ketogenic diet. She felt great. The main things that she really felt good about was the depression, because she had bad postpartum depression, and she weaned herself off of the Zoloft. It was still brutal for her. It was still brutal, but I feel like it helped her. And then we went on a trip. Literally, it was August of 2017, and I had just started carnivore like 3 days earlier. And we went on a trip to Puerto Rico, and Maura was dieting. She was trying to lean out a little bit, and she was just adding salads. And I'm telling you, man, it wasn't one bad batch of salad. It was literally a few times where different places, different salads. She would wake up in the middle of the night and she would vomit, and then she would feel better and go back to sleep. And on the flight, I sent her a Georgia Eid podcast and an Amber O'Hearn podcast, and she listened to them. And by the time we got to Puerto Rico, she's like, "Let's go! I'm ready to go. I'm gonna eat nothing but meat with you this weekend." And in that first weekend, for a woman to lose 3 pounds, she wasn't trying to lose all that weight, but she lost 3 pounds right away. And on top of that, over time, what she really noticed was the anxiety. Like you can have probably feel better with depression, but Maura's not the only person that that tells me that anxiety had all but disappeared with this carnivore diet. Yet then she did the MRT food sensitivity panel, and first of all, she's allergic to Thanksgiving. Like she can't do maple, she can't do turkey, she can't do pumpkin. And so we, for the past 3 years, have done Steaksgiving. Like we do steaks and beef, and then for dessert we'll do chocolate. She handles chocolate well. And so if she has anything like even onion, I have to make our own rubs. She's closer to like a Michaela Peterson, when not completely, because Michaela has a lot of stuff, but when it comes to like even the seasonings, the onion, the nightshades, all of that, and each one has its own symptom. One of them is headaches, one of them is gastrointestinal stuff, one of them is all this other stuff. And so it's just for her. And I've been denying this because I said, oh, she needs it more than I do. But then I go to Mexico and I have tacos with corn shells and I feel like crap after 3 days. So I know that I'm probably denying a little bit, and I'm feeling that more, like you said, as my age gets a little bit, I'm 5 years older than her. So I'm starting to feel these things more. And I kind of like being forced into carnivore, because it just makes it so much easier. But she's seen, the only thing that I'll tell you is that she does, like, she'll have either some dates or some honey on day, like 1 to 2 days after ovulation. and like the first day of her cycle every month. And for her, a carb up is like 30 to 50 grams, because when you're eating zero carbs, that's a nice little carb up. And I'm telling you, just after 1 month of doing that, boom, she has a 28-day cycle. Now, I know that there's people, and all of this is anecdotal, but I know there's a lot of people that do well with calorie cycling, like Robert talks about. And Crystal his wife has had success with that. We haven't tried that yet. But we just know that just those couple of times a month, they really do help her cycle. Because a 25-day cycle is not fun for anyone. None of us are enjoying that.
Let me, I guess, I'm going to go back to the Ben Pakulski thing, because you talked about inefficiency. Because a lot of people don't understand that concept. When you're training, the muscle is going to respond, to the maximum you can stress on it. And so what we do as athletes is we try to become as efficient as possible, right? Yep. So you see guys that are like Olympic lifters where they just move this incredible amount of weight, but it's through technique. And
they stay the same weight class. Yep.
Right. And so they can get very strong, and you get performance. It's different. But when your goal is to bodybuild, and again, whether your goal, I'm not putting bodybuilders up as the paragons of fitness or icons of health, but like I said, if your goal is to put on muscle, then bodybuilders know how to do that better than anyone else, if you want to do that. And so give us an example of an inefficiency. How would that go?
The first time I ever trained with him, I was still real strong in the deadlift, and he put 405 pounds on the bar, and we were doing 5-second negatives. And I felt like my whole posterior chain was getting torn apart. And like Ben talks about, the most important thing is the muscle contraction. We never talked about that. I mean, we know what muscles generally are, but I always looked at, even my programming, I looked at movements, overhead pressing, horizontal pulling, hip hinging, knee dominant exercises. I wasn't like training back and shoulders. I wasn't doing that. And so Ben was the opposite. A bodybuilder looks at their body and they're like, I need to build this thing. And when you're doing that, you really do need to focus on the contraction. And what I learned from Ben is focusing on muscle contractions at every length of the contraction. And you can only do that with SSI, what he calls, which is basically set up for your anatomy. For example, someone like you or me, we're not gonna benefit our upper chest with a high incline. We're going to automatically hit shoulders with that. So we can't go too high on the incline. We have to basically go like 30 degrees at the most, and we'll be able to get something out of that. So that's your setup. Then stabilize is focusing on, it's the opposite of multi-joint movements. We're only focusing on one joint at a time. And so if my shoulder joint is not stationary in place, and I'm doing a chest press, then at some point of that lift, there's other muscles that are coming in. And of course, that leads to injury, that leads to less muscle contraction. And then the last part would be the initiate side of it, which is, everybody understands how to contract their muscles in the shortened position. That's pretty easy. You can feel, but how do you contract it in the lengthened position? And for example, with the chest example, it would be with simple coaching cues, such as, when I initiate the movement, and anyone can try this the next time they go to do like a dumbbell bench, dig your traps and your rhomboids into the pad to initiate it, and you'll feel a good contraction in the lengthened position. And little things like that are what have made a big aesthetic difference for me, where all of a sudden, like I felt like my muscles in this area, because we know you can change where the tension's coming from, and you can work those fibers differently, which before I never thought of that, but it's for every single muscle you could do that. And so like, even if you're not trying to become Mr. Bodybuilder, from even just longevity standpoint of like, as a lifter, always be aware of your joint. So you're if you're doing a bicep curl, the cheat curl thing, that's not gonna, I don't see a lot of, I could see the risk is much higher than the benefit for that. And then a lot of this stuff it ends up being a metabolic workout and not a muscle workout. And if you're saying that you're training biceps, then train biceps. You're going to lower the weight. And that's the other thing too, is that, we used to train like we said, you used to train with your under regions, and now you train with your brain. When you're young, train with your balls. When you're old, you train with your brain. That's what happens, and it does help you. Brett loves that. But it's true, because like it's going to prevent injury. You're going to work the muscles that need to be worked. The body is so efficient. And that's why, for example, like the back squat is so problematic for so many people, because the body finds ways to do things. I have really, really long femurs. I'd look at you and I know that you got the same issues. I'm going to have a low bar position, and I'm going to be much more angled when I squat than someone like Robert, who can literally put the bar high and squat and stay vertical the whole time. And that's just because of our anatomy. And so a lot of people don't know these things. And the other thing is they automatically assume that adding more weight is going to be better, when you can take the weight away and just focus on contracting the muscle, and you could barely do a full set. When I did pull-ups with Robert, the way Ben taught me, the first time we ever did that, he basically got like 6, and it was brutal for him, because we retracted our scapulas, and instead of pulling ourselves up, we basically focused on rowing. So keeping the elbow as far away as my body as possible, and you really feel that lat contraction. So these are just things that I think a lot of people don't think about. And especially if you're trying to do like what all the, a lot of women are trying to build the booty, you got to focus on the contraction versus the movement. Squats, for example, aren't exactly the best glute builder. Hip hinging and hip extension is going to be the best glute builder, So I think all those things have been really helpful. And then the other thing that Ben and I really wanted to focus on with lower carb and ketogenic diets and carnivore diets is just making sure that what's better. Someone who goes into the gym for an hour and a half every single time has been kind of training the same way forever and hasn't really changed much. Or the person who says, you know what, this may not look like a lot on paper, but when I am in that set, I'm locked in, and I also have longer rest periods. So like I'm resting, most of the time 2 to 3 minutes between sets, and I'm doing 6 to 8 reps, but every single rep looks exactly like the other rep. They all look the same, and I'm getting much more quality. And so we focus on execution, and then we also talk about troubleshooting, because if you're like the type of person like me, some of my genetic SNPs, I cramp more. I have a big problem with cramping in the summer. And so, you're going to want to keep an eye on that. And sometimes if you're going too hard, you're doing too much high intensity stuff, you may find that you feel stressed, like you feel tired and wired, like you're waking up at 2 a.m. and you're wide awake. Maybe you got to scale back on that training. Maybe you got to like take a parasympathetic day. And then just the last thing that we really like to focus on is the importance of breathing, and we've been doing a lot of breath holds like during and after sets. So like after a set, we'll do like hyperventilate for 10 breaths, and then offload everything. And after that, wait 10 seconds. And now we're driving that oxygen, instead of oxygenating our lungs, we're driving that oxygen into the tissues, which I think would help not only put us back into parasympathetic, because we want to be able to switch from 1 second to another. Parasympathetic on the offset, not going on Facebook and arguing about COVID in the offset, when you're off, just chilling when you're off. And then when you're on, turn it on. That way, every single set is quality,
All right, tell me a little bit, because I know you guys did some kind of thing, something in Mexico recently. I saw that as well. What was the story on that? And then I guess out of potentially getting COVID, how was that? And tell me a little bit more about what went down there.
So let me tell you, the flights, American Airlines doesn't care about social distancing. All they care about is telling me to wear my mask and make sure that it's not, they didn't let me wear my mesh mask, which I was upset about that because I loved my mesh mask because I could breathe. But I really do think that's when we got it, was on the flight, because the flights were packed. We went on an all-inclusive trip to Mexico, but we have a fitness themed trip coming in October. That's going to be like going to Tulum Jungle Gym, and just getting a bunch of like-minded people together to go on vacation. And instead of drinking all day, my wife and I, Mauda's sober 11 years. I'm sober over 8 years. We want to just create this culture of like, because some people are doing it already, like, active escapes, and there's some companies out there doing it. But when I got to Mexico, I always love, when I travel, I always love to kind of talk to the locals, especially if it's a Spanish speaking country, because I can speak to them and they can talk to me like what we say in Spanish, like with your underwear off. That means like they can talk to me, give it to me straight. And these guys were hurting for 5 months, man. So let me tell you, you go to Mexico, you're going to feel great because they want your money and they want you happy. And so if you're one of those people that are healthy and, you feel like you could take your chances if you get something, Mexico's a great place to go. Mexico's wide open. They've been open since May and they're moving forward, and I don't see any issues over there. And so it's pretty good. I was worried about the traveling thing. I was very nervous that day, but I felt like I had a lot more. I was a lot more inconvenienced at the airport and on the airplane than I was when I got to Mexico.
Let me ask you one last thing I was going to ask about. Yeah, what what do you have? So you said you had something with Jamie and Logan. When does that come out?
So that should be out at the end of this month, and that's going to give people. Hey, I don't know how much I can give away because it's not, but think of like, how Peloton is, like where you can buy a bike and you can get on any stationary bike, but what's cool about Peloton is like the community aspect of it. And so this thing that's going to come out is going to help people from beginner to advanced. Beginners, like, hey, what is keto? You have like videos from us kind of walking you through and keeping it as simple as possible. Keto, intermittent fasting, but mostly it's at first, especially, it's going to be a lot around intermittent fasting and fasting. And so Jamie and me are the first two coaches. We're going to bring some other people on, and that's with Keto Coach. And then we have Couch to Carnivore is a course that I made with my buddy Adam Shively. You remember Adam, you were on his podcast, Million Pound Mission. And that's just basically taking people, he approached me with that idea because there's, like you said, there's so many people that don't know anything. I wanted to create something that can bring someone from Jenny Craig or Weight Watchers all the way to carnivore. And so we start them with a low carb approach. We lower their carbs to about 100 and we clean out their pantries. We take out all the crap. We tell them what to look at and what to remove. And then we move to keto. And then from there, it all depends on how far you want to take it with carnivore, because we have like 3 different phases for carnivore alone. Some people do well with the dairy, some people don't. We're offering like something where we walk you through that, and then at the end of that, keeping in mind how you feel in each phase, you can say, you know what, I felt really good with some cheese in my diet. I'm not going to take the cheese out. Or I didn't feel really good until I cut everything out and just did meat and water. So that's really what we got going on. Of course, we have the Carnivore Keto Cut, which by now it's been thousands of people. We have people from over 20 countries who've done it. And just if someone's looking for a way, it's not complicated. It's literally carnivore with caloric restriction. And, we take them through. If you lose a certain amount of weight, you don't change your macros. If you do, you keep going for a month, and then you have 2 weeks of kind of like a maintenance before you reverse diet back up over another 6-week period. And yeah, that's basically it, man. That's what I've been up to. The other thing is this pet project on the side, this rock body retreat that we got in October. We want to do those like every quarter. So where we're basically doing all inclusive fitness retreats where we get a bunch of people together. We maybe do one like nutritional seminar, but we don't want to this is a vacation, you know, so we want people to just be outside and, you know, enjoying their time, working out together. And then from there, you know, just keep going. I'm sorry, Mara's walking in.
Take my stuff.
Yeah. So.
Well, tell her I said hi. Anyway, well, good.
Hey, Dr. Baker says hi, my love.
Oh, hi.
Good. Anyway, Danny, well, we've right up come about an hour, so that's usually what we do. But anyway, thanks, man. That's been great information. It's good talking. I look forward to seeing you live again whenever we're allowed to do that stuff again. But good luck with all these ventures. It's great stuff. Let us know, let everybody know where to find you, social media, all that stuff.
So DannyVega.ms on Instagram. You can go to fatfueled.family. That's where the podcast is, our store, our blog. You know, we just put up, I want you to try my organ meat burgers. I promise you'll like them. I just, when we next see each other, cause I just shared the recipe on there. It's a pain in the butt for anybody but me, but I'm the type of person who's like, okay, I'm going to stick the meat, the heart, the liver, the kidney, and the bacon all in the grinder. I made it with pork belly yesterday, and we had friends over. The kids were tearing it up, man. Like it's really good. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've had organ meat burgers before. I don't mind them. I don't necessarily dislike them that much. It's just, I'm just not that, you know.
I'm not the type of person that says like, hey, I want a good piece of liver. You know what I mean? Yeah. But I do love these organ meat burgers because it's how we get more vitamins into our kids.
There you go. If it works for you, it works for you. Good for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's probably, you know, I think if you're going to eat them, just eat them, you know, and don't overpay for someone to shrink them down, put them in a bottle. Anyway. All right, man. All right. Take care, Danny. Appreciate it, guys. Hey, guys,
thanks,
the new
Baker.
folks, if I haven't had a chance to welcome you, as soon as I can, I want to welcome you guys. So see you guys tomorrow. Take care, Danny. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.